Latest update, April 1st, key developments. 1. Trump issues ultimatum, get your own oil, to allies 2. U.S. and Israel launch new wave of attacks on Tehran and Isfahan 3. Iranian drone attacks Kuwaiti oil tanker Al Selmi off the coast of Dubai 4. Iran threatens to target 18 U.S. technology and financial companies 5. Casualties rise in Lebanon with deaths of IDF soldiers and UN peacekeepers. Good morning. Have a great day. Join me as we go over today's important news. The end of the free ride era. Trump's Europe withdrawal strategy on the morning of Tuesday, March 31st, 2026. President Donald Trump fundamentally redefined the nature of the American security umbrella in a series of incendiary truth social posts. Addressing a world paralyzed by the near-total closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway responsible for 20% of the world's oil supply, Trump issued what can only be described as a strategic ultimatum to the United Kingdom, France, and other NATO allies. The president's message was a response to the growing desperation in London and Paris as jet fuel and crude inventories hit critical lows. Rather than offering U.S. Navy escorts or diplomatic intervention, Trump told these nations they must learn how to fight for themselves. He specifically criticized the United Kingdom for its refusal to commit naval assets to what he termed the decapitation of Iran, a mission aimed at the total destruction of the Islamic Republic's military and political leadership. Trump's rhetoric was blunt. The hard part is done. Iran has been decimated. If you want oil, go to the Strait of Hormuz and just take it. He further suggested that if allies were unwilling to bleed for the waterway, they should look to purchase plenty of American jet fuel at market prices, effectively turning a security crisis into a commercial opportunity for U.S. energy producers. The president singled out France as being very unhelpful, citing Paris's recent decision to deny overflight rights to U.S. military transport planes carrying munitions to the theater. Reports from the ground in the Persian Gulf confirm that while the U.S. and Israel have conducted the bulk of the kinetic operations, the strait remains a kill zone where Iran continues to deploy mines and swarming drone tactics. Trump's refusal to secure the waterway for uncooperative partners marks the first time since the 1945 Quincy House Agreement that a U.S. president has openly conditioned the safety of global energy transit on direct participation in an American-led offensive. The reality we face is far from what is packaged in the headlines. This is not merely a fiery social media post. It is the formal conclusion of the post-World War II era of American-guaranteed global commons. For 80 years, the U.S. Navy functioned as a global public good, ensuring the free flow of commerce regardless of a nation's specific alignment on every tactical issue. That era is dead. It was not a mistake. It was a choice. From a realist perspective, Trump is executing a security for subscription model. He has correctly identified that the U.S. is now energy independent, while its traditional allies are not. This creates a massive power asymmetry. By withdrawing the free security of the strait, Washington is forcing London and Paris into an impossible choice: join a high-risk war with no clear exit strategy or face an unsolvable economic equation at home. The strategic failure here lies in the assumption of allied solidarity. The European powers, paralyzed by domestic energy costs and a fear of Iranian terror cells on their own soil, have attempted to play both sides, condemning the decapitation strikes while still expecting the U.S. to keep their gas stations full. Trump has called their bluff. However, the unintended consequences of this move are staggering. If the U.S. abdicates its role as the protector of the strait, it invites other powers, specifically China, to fill the vacuum. If Beijing steps in to mediate or escort tankers in exchange for long-term concessions, the U.S. may win the tactical argument about paying their fair share, but lose the strategic dominance of the Indo-Pacific gateway. This is no longer a partnership. It is a protection racket. In the cold logic of power, those who do not fight for their interests eventually lose them. The Isfahan fireball, kinetic diplomacy at the red line in the early hours of Tuesday, March 31st, 2026, the night sky over central Iran was illuminated by what NASA satellite thermal imaging described as a sustained high-magnitude thermal event. A massive, coordinated air campaign led by U.S. and Israeli forces targeted the Iranian capital, Tehran, and the central strategic hub of Isfahan. The primary target in Isfahan appears to have been the Isfahan Nuclear Technology Center. Intelligence sources, corroborated by social media footage of secondary explosions, indicate that the strikes targeted specialized underground bunkers. U.S. officials claim these facilities recently received 18 blue containers of 60% enriched uranium, moved there weeks prior to avoid detection. The strikes utilized deep penetration munitions, commonly known as bunker busters, intended to reach the deep vein enrichment tunnels. Simultaneously, strikes in Tehran hit the Pasteur Street district, home to the National Security Council and several military command centers. Beyond purely military targets, the Iranian government reported damage to a major pharmaceutical complex that produces critical anesthetic and cancer medications, labeling the attack a crime against humanity. While the Pentagon describes the mission as surgical, the scale of the damage suggests a broader goal of total infrastructure degradation. In Isfahan, the Mobarak steel factory and the university's technology department, both linked to the IRGC's drone program, were leveled. This wave of strikes follows the February 28th surprise commencement of hostilities, which the U.S. has termed Operation Epic Fury. As of today, the death toll from this campaign is estimated to have surpassed 3,000, including high-ranking IRGC officials and numerous civilian technicians. We must ask, can you bomb a nuclear program out of existence? History suggests the answer is no, but you can certainly bomb it into a state of paralysis. By targeting Isfahan, the U.S. and Israel have moved beyond deterrence and into dismantlement. This is no longer a shadow war. It is a full-scale effort to reset the Middle Eastern balance of power by force. Behind the curtain, this campaign reveals a desperate race against time. The strategic inference here is that Western intelligence believed Iran was mere days away from a breakout to 90% weapons-grade purity. The decision to strike central Isfahan, a heavily populated cultural and industrial hub, indicates that the risk of a nuclear-armed Iran was finally weighed as greater than the risk of a total regional conflagration. But consider the unintended consequences. By hitting pharmaceutical plants and universities, the U.S.-Israeli coalition is inadvertently fueling the very resistance narrative they seek to dismantle. When surgical strikes become indistinguishable from infrastructure warfare, the target population does not turn against its leaders. It rallies around the flag in a desperate survival instinct. Furthermore, the strategic realist must look at the nuclear rubble problem. If you destroy the facilities, but the scientists survive, you have not solved the problem. You have only radicalized the solution. Iran's move to bring Russia and China into the ceasefire negotiations is a masterstroke designed to prevent a Libya-style total collapse. Tehran is using its rubble to buy international sympathy and high-level protection from Washington's rivals. The strikes may have destroyed the bunkers, but they have also destroyed any hope of a diplomatic solution for the next generation. The message to Tehran is clear: surrender or disappear. But the question remains, does Iran have the capacity to make the world disappear with it? The Al-Salmi incident, the economic front of the drone war at approximately 12:10 a.m. on March 31st, 2026, the war of the tankers reached a new and dangerous phase. An Iranian suicide drone struck the Al-Salmi, a Kuwaiti-flagged Very Large Crude Carrier, VLCC, while it was positioned in the Anchorage E area off the coast of Dubai. The vessel, owned by the Kuwait Petroleum Corporation, KPC, was fully laden with 2 million barrels of crude, 1.2 million from Saudi Arabia and 800,000 from Kuwait, destined for Qingdao, China. The impact occurred on the starboard side, tearing a hole in the hull and sparking a major fire near the engine room. Emergency maritime firefighting teams from Dubai were mobilized immediately, and the blaze was successfully extinguished by dawn. Miraculously, all 24 crew members were reported safe, and authorities confirmed there was no significant oil leakage into the delicate Persian Gulf ecosystem. However, the IRGC's subsequent statement added a layer of chilling incompetence or deliberate confusion. They claimed their intended target was the Haiphong Express, a Singapore-flagged container ship anchored nearby, which they accused of having Zionist ties. This suggests that any vessel in the vicinity of unfriendly assets is now a legitimate target in the eyes of Tehran. The immediate effect was not environmental, but economic. Insurance premiums for vessels entering the Gulf have soared by 400% in the last 24 hours. Major shipping lines, including Maersk and MSC, have announced a temporary suspension of all anchorage stays in the UAE, forcing ships to remain in the more exposed open waters of the Gulf of Oman. This was not an attack on a ship. It was an attack on the global insurance market. Iran understands that it cannot win a symmetric naval battle against the U.S. Fifth Fleet. It doesn't need to. By hitting a Kuwaiti vessel carrying Saudi oil to China, Iran has sent a multi-dimensional message that no one is safe and no one is neutral. The strategic logic here is cost imposition. Iran is forcing the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, states to pay a ruinous price for their tacit support of the U.S.-Israeli campaign. By striking so close to Dubai, a global hub of tourism and finance, Tehran is demonstrating that it can turn off the lights of the regional economy without firing a single shot at a skyscraper. Is this a strategic failure for Iran? Tactically, they hit the wrong ship. But strategically, the error is irrelevant. The message is that the Strait of Hormuz is no longer a geographical choke point. The entire Persian Gulf is now a choke point. The behind-the-curtain reality is that Iran is weaponizing the insurance red line. When Lloyd's of London declares a zone uninsurable, the war is won without a single tank crossing a border. The Al-Salmi incident has effectively paralyzed commercial shipping more effectively than a physical blockade ever could. The U.S. response, or lack thereof, is the final piece of this realist puzzle. By failing to provide immediate, impenetrable escort for even neutral tankers like the Al-Salmi, Washington is confirming Trump's go-get-your-own-oil policy. This creates a vacuum of authority. If the U.S. won't protect the tankers and Iran is hitting them, the GCC nations will eventually be forced to cut their own deals with Tehran. This is not a war of attrition. It is a war of exhaustion. Iran is betting that the world's appetite for $200 a barrel oil is much lower than Iran's appetite for regional chaos. It was not just an attack on a tanker. It was the sinking of the global energy supply chain. The IRGC's Silicon Curtain, the targeting of U.S. tech. Detailed content summary on Tuesday afternoon. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, issued a chilling proclamation via its official SIPA news portal and affiliated Telegram channels, marking a radical expansion of the theater of war. The IRGC announced that starting Wednesday, April 1st at 8 p.m. Tehran time, it would begin targeting 18 specific U.S.-based technology and finance companies operating within the Middle East. The list of targets is a who's who of the American corporate elite, including Microsoft, Apple, Alphabet, Google, Meta, IBM, Cisco, Tesla, NVIDIA, Intel, Boeing, Amazon, specifically AWS, Palantir, Oracle, and JP Morgan. The IRGC's justification is rooted in the spy narrative. Tehran accuses these firms of acting as digital mercenaries and providing the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, ISR, data, as well as the artificial intelligence, AI, algorithms that enabled the U.S. and Israel to conduct high-precision decapitation strikes against Iranian leadership and nuclear facilities. General Hossein Salami's successors in the IRGC command stated, since the main element in designing and tracking terrorist targets are American ICT and AI companies, these institutions will be our legitimate targets. The ultimatum was accompanied by a clearance warning that urged all employees, regardless of nationality, and civilians living within a 1-kilometer radius of these companies' offices, data centers, and research facilities to evacuate immediately. Specifically cited were Google's regional office in Dubai, Palantir's Strategic Collaboration Center in Abu Dhabi, and AWS recently established cloud clusters in Bahrain. The announcement sent immediate shockwaves through the Nasdaq, with shares of Nvidia and Microsoft retreating from early session gains as investors began pricing in the risk of physical destruction of multi-billion-dollar R&D infrastructure. Iranian state-linked media even published target slides that included the exact GPS coordinates and facility descriptions of 29 specific locations across the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and Israel. Strategic depth analysis, we have reached the end of the neutral technocracy myth. For decades, Western tech giants have operated under the assumption that they could provide the plumbing of the global digital economy while remaining insulated from the kinetic consequences of state-level warfare. That era ended this morning. The IRGC has fundamentally altered the geopolitical chessboard by classifying software as a weapon and data centers as legitimate military targets. The logic behind this move is both desperate and brilliant. Iran recognizes that it cannot match the U.S. in a symmetric exchange of carrier groups and F-35s. However, it can target the soft underbelly of American power, the private sector. By targeting companies like Palantir or AWS, Iran is not just attacking a building, it is attacking the very nervous system of modern Western governance and warfare. This is the weaponization of everything. It creates a dilemma for the United States. Does an attack on a Microsoft office in Dubai constitute an act of war, requiring a military response? If the U.S. defends these private assets with state power, it confirms Tehran's spy narrative. If it doesn't, the myth of American security for global business evaporates. The reality we face is the balkanization of global finance and technology. We are watching the descent of a silicon curtain across the Middle East. If multinational corporations can no longer ensure the safety of their employees or the integrity of their data centers in the region, they will flee. This capital flight is exactly what Tehran desires. They are betting that the U.S. business lobby will eventually exert more pressure on the Trump administration to de-escalate than any number of military advisors could. However, the unintended consequences for Iran are severe. By targeting civilian integrated tech hubs, they risk alienating the very regional partners, like the UAE and Qatar, that they need to balance against the U.S. It is a high-stakes gamble. Will the Gulf states blame the U.S. for bringing the war to their doorstep, or will they finally unite to eliminate the Iranian threat? The strategic foresight suggests that we are moving toward a world where corporate neutrality is dead. In the conflicts of the 2020s, a CFO must now be as well-versed in anti-access/area denial, A2/AD, strategies as any four-star general. It is not just about profit and loss anymore. It is about survival in a landscape where the line between a civilian office and a frontline trench has been permanently erased. The world of 2026 demands more than just a surface-level reading of the news. It requires a cold, hard look at the mechanics of power. If you want to understand the why behind the headlines and prepare for the strategic shifts that will define the next decade,